Money is changing again. It happens every once in a while, and we are in a wonderful position to watch that transformation happen. Hello and welcome back to Crypto Clarified. My name is Benjamin Dean. I'm Director of Digital Asset Strategy at WisdomTree. Today I'm joined by Nikhil Chandhok, who is Chief Product Officer at Circle. I get a bit overexcited in this episode because Nikhil is so well experienced and versed in this space and is working on very interesting things around stablecoins, cross-border payments, and so on. You have to listen to the episode, but before you get to do that, I have to do the following. US listeners, WisdomTreePrime.com, Android, Apple app stores. Check it out, the app. You can download it if you are a US listener. Almost all states have done that. For those of you, even if you are a US listener, anyone outside the US, hit subscribe and share on this podcast because that helps us get good information out to people. Because it turns out, and we've been doing this for at least 3 years now, there are many, many very bright people who work on this technology and are building very successful businesses as a consequence. Check me out on the Bird app, Twitter, X, at Benjamin Dean. Now the disclaimer. Before I begin, I need to say the following to clarify the views and opinions expressed in this podcast of this WisdomTree and Circle and subject to change. Anything we present in this podcast is not intended to be relied upon as forecast research, nor as investment tax advice. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast not a recommendation, offer, a solicitation, buy and sell of securities, and reliance upon them is at the sole discretion of listener. Please remember, past performance is an indication of future results. All right, let's go to Nikhil. Nikhil, welcome to Crypto Clarified.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's going to be an excellent discussion today, I'm sure. To kick things off, though, usually with guests, we ask them to explain their background, how they got involved in this digital asset or crypto space. And people have very interesting backgrounds, the people who've been pulled in, like when I worked in cybersecurity. Please just let people know a bit about you, why you're interested in this space, and why you're doing the work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a background perspective, I've always worked on the internet. I was at Google in 2005. I was at YouTube for many years. I most recently, before Circle, I was at Meta. I was responsible for their AR glasses project.
Which really?
Also, yes. And you must have seen some recent announcements on that. And so for me, I gravitate towards things that are fundamentally new, and ideally they're off the internet. They're off the internet, for the internet, by the internet. Like YouTube is kind of that. I spent about 7.5, 8 years there. There was no concept of short form video before YouTube, so sort of like it's if you think about it as a format, it sort of came about on the internet. The audience is on the internet. It's people watch games on YouTube. It's off the internet, for the internet, by the internet. And so then I came into Bitcoin, in 2009. My graduate work in school was around distributed systems, like the problem that is described in the Bitcoin paper. That's the first chapter of the distributed systems book in graduate school. And so I was like, how did they solve this? It was such a mystery to me. And so I sort of stayed with it for many years. I sort of dabbled in Bitcoin, dabbled in Ethereum. I convinced my wife to work in, I wasn't the only one, but I convinced her that this is a good space to work in. So she worked in it.
Was that a hard negotiation?
Yeah, because we used to, the funny story is, the guy who used to run Silk Road, he used to live in my neighborhood. And so one afternoon, I don't know, it was mid last decade, all of these drones show up, and the FBI shows up, and SWAT shows up. And
really?
Yeah. And it's they're flying these drones around our neighborhood in the Mission in San Francisco. And I'm forgetting his name, but the Silk Road guy was basically arrested who lived like behind.
Oh,
And so, and my wife asked me, she's like, who is this guy?
Ross Ulbricht.
Ross. Yeah.
Ross.
Yeah. She's like, who is this guy? I was like, well, he does this thing where you can go and buy anything on the dark web, and then they captured like, Bitcoin, I think, from in that transaction. She's like, well, what is this Bitcoin thing? I was like, well, we have some, and it's great. So, and it is sort of like internet native money, and like again,
Yeah.
like it is Bitcoin is just comes about on the internet. Like there's no prior on it. So then she worked in this space for a long time. I mean, she currently runs an industry advocacy group in this space. And so when I sort of got done with like AR glasses, I was like, cool, like, what do I want to do? And for me, like, sort of crypto is so fundamental to the evolution of the internet, and how the internet, which is fundamentally a force for good, has been able to sort of like utilize. We need crypto to sort of like advance the sort of open internet that we all sort of treasure and have benefited from. And so for me, it's some mission driven, some curiosity driven, mission driven in the sense that I want the internet to be open, and I want like more innovation on the internet, and I mean, a major area of innovation is financial services, but I also want like I just want the internet to evolve and not get like captured by like specific interests, because for me,
Yeah.
like, it has been the biggest unlock of my life. Like, I grew up in India. I didn't know anybody in the US. I came to the US because of the internet. I would read like research papers in 1995 dial-up internet, and like and I got smart from that. And the story of the world is the story of the internet in the last 25 years. You
Yeah.
cannot separate that. And so the internet is this very valuable concept. We have to preserve it. We have to make progress on it. And it enables and empowers a bunch of people around the world. I saw it closely with YouTube. Um, YouTube has like 2 billion users today. So crypto is that. Like, crypto is one way of doing it. I don't know if it's the only way of doing it, but it's definitely an important way of doing it. So,
Yeah.
so that's how I came to work on crypto. Yeah.
That's fascinating. One of the AI researchers from the 1980s who taught me pointed out that the early internet, the idea was spread of information, open access.
Yeah.
People have access to information, can make better decisions, better outcome, right?
Yep.
And that the segue here is, well, yeah, the internet exists. It's been captured in many places, as we know, and we watch playing out. But there's an interesting concept here, which I know the folks at Circle say is open money. And let's kind of dig into that, because money, in a way, is somewhat always open, in the sense that, you end up finding Roman denarii in like parts of India.
Yep.
They've got them mapped, right? So
Yep.
it's not new, the idea that money circulates, and certain money circulates in
Yep.
certain places, usually trade. But in a digital world, which is where we sit now, what does that look like, and how does that map back to what Circle's doing?
Yep. So, so what's money? Money is like, at least for me, is like it's like a store of value, and like maybe it's a store of energy. So like we have these units that like store a bunch of work that everybody does. They take all this energy and they do the work, and then they store it in this like little concept called money, and then we distribute the money. So that's money. And so, where does it store? Like, it's stored. Your money in the US is stored in a bank account, and now let's say you want to send that money to somebody in the US, or you want to send that money somewhere outside the US.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those are very complex operations, right? They are not as simple as sending an email. So when we say like it is not open money, we are saying that like to send money to somebody else should follow a common language that like everybody understands, much like
A lingua franca
sorry.
is the Latin term, I should
Yeah,
say.
exactly.
It's a
And
common tongue.
so your browser, basically, if you go to any website, your browser works on every website. It's not like that you have to have a custom browser for website. right? So anyone, anywhere in the world can use a browser to access any website. That makes sense. So can we have a similar way of dealing with money? Can anyone, anywhere in the world have access to any kind of money that they want? Now, obviously, this is not meant to say that we should escape like rules and regulations. That, like sovereign governments can still have rules.
Well, that's a whole thing, isn't it?
That's a
Like
whole thing. Yeah.
let's set that aside and talk about it later. But
Let's just talk about the technology, right? Like it's just saying
yes,
like from a technology perspective, it would be really nice if like we had a common way of interacting with money all around the world. And if we had a common way of interacting with money all around the world, we would be able to build new functionality on it. The same way the internet has done it on websites. You have massively different websites you have right now than you had 20 years ago. And you have this collective like innovation on these websites. And we would like that innovation to come to money as well, like, as a
yes,
concept. And so that's what open money means. So that's one definition of open money. It is sort of like this open, like standard space ability to like access it in a common language around the world. The other thing it means is like programmability, because like what does it mean to be open? You can actually program it. You can make new applications really, really fast, much like you can do on the internet. And at some level, it also means like being able to do like cross-border things much more easily.
absolutely.
Right? Which is much like sending email, which is like, so all of these things put together is like,
It's meant to be like that, right?
it's meant to be like that.
And
It's not for stable coins. We can talk about what stable coins is. Stable coins are able to do it pretty well. But we can get into that as well. Yeah. I'm curious, how did you get interested in crypto? Like, I'm curious, like, what is your...
Oh, look, the listeners already know the story, but I'll keep it brief. I lived in Venezuela about 12 years ago, just after Hugo Chavez died. And I turn up and there's capital controls,
Yep.
hyperinflation's kicking in, banking system's inefficient, and everyone's got Blackberries. And I said, well, wouldn't it be useful if you could put internet money on a phone,
Yep.
smartphone, they call them. Wouldn't that be absolutely wild? Because those people wouldn't be trapped, having their savings debased via inflation. B, people have fled abroad. They can send money to one another digitally. No one can get in the way. Good, and it's cheap. Cheaper than the options on hand. C, they avoid the banking system where their assets can be confiscated at will.
Right.
And D, whoever's in government at the time, it doesn't matter what they think. So it was that is my experience. And that's how I knew. I used to follow the cypherpunks mailing list, right? When I lived back at home in Sydney, Australia, where a lot of the cypherpunks were born and grew up in Melbourne. But it was obvious, right? So that's the short story. Sorry, listeners, I have to tell the story again. But that's where I come from, Nikhil. And that's how it just is just the most obvious thing on the planet, especially if you go from country to country, as I've done. Like when I lived in Vietnam, capital controls in place. Nikhil, you probably know how big the Vietnamese diaspora is.
It is.
And the remittances that come back from different countries, especially US, to Vietnam, it's horribly costly. And, it's hard-earned money that's being given to people who've got a set of intermediaries, and they take their cut along the way. And the people on the other end in Vietnam, what do they end up with? 30% less than that which was sent, and it's a message, right?
Yep. It's just
really, like I could give you a million other examples. No, not a million. Let's say a dozen. But like, it's just the most obvious thing on the planet, in my opinion.
It is like, it is really inefficient. And it is inefficient because the way the systems have been designed. I don't think there are, because these systems are all, they all speak their own language. When two systems connect, they have to sort of figure out how to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And much like, so it's not open. And because when it's not open, it introduces friction. They have to hire engineers to figure out like, how do we make sure that this system talks to this system. Not only that, they have to float capital, which is fundamentally expensive. And that cost is then passed on to the end user. So USDC or stable coins essentially eliminate all of that. They allow you to
True.
send money to whoever you want in the world. They allow you to settle instantaneously with anyone in the world. And all of these inefficiencies that come from like systems not being able to speak to each other go away because you have a common protocol or a common language that everybody speaks and everybody understands. Like these are like Ethereum tokens, and like everybody knows how to program on Ethereum or any blockchain for that matter. I'm just using Ethereum because people are familiar with
Yeah, or EVM compatible, like
all
it's the
EVM.
same.
We can do it on Solana. We can do it on any chain. Like it doesn't really
Yep.
matter. But the thing is, like, because the transaction record is out in the public, everybody knows that two wallets that are transacting, that the value has been exchanged, and so there's a common ledger that everybody agrees on, and that allows for the movement of money to be superbly fast, and it reduces settlement risk. It also sort of reduces the time that the money is stuck. Like when you send a remittance to Vietnam, it is
Exactly.
stuck in the system for like a few days. And that, I mean, we estimate
Yep.
there's about $3 trillion stuck in transit at any given time. And so imagine that, like if we gave that back,
Really?
yeah,
We're
that's
never
massive.
getting to Mars if people are spending like $3 trillion like that, like just like
Yeah.
burning it, basically. Like you
Yeah.
might as well just go and, like Kane said, dig holes and fill them back in again. And there you go. Like it's anyway,
So
I'm interrupting you. I'm sorry.
it is a lot of money that is stuck. And the question is like, and that is error prone, it's risky. Um, you can have intermediate banks die on you and they will take the money with them. So it's fundamentally systemic risk. And there's no reason for the systemic risk to exist. And it shows up. Why should we care? Even if the system is not dying, it shows up as cost to end users. Okay.
Yes.
And why does that cost? If we gave $3 trillion back a year to the world economy, I think we would do a lot of good. And if we gave programmability to the world in terms of how money works, we would be able to create new credit products, which would include like create like empowerment around the world. Like credit is a very complicated concept. It works well in the US, in Western economies, rest of the world, it doesn't. And so how should we build that product? So all of these are tools for financial empowerment. And they, as they get built now, they should be built in an open way that everybody can participate.
Yep. You're giving me flashbacks from like 12, 13 years ago when I did grad school and I was a teaching assistant for microfinance. And
Right.
the whole idea was like, how can you help people manage their money better? Which is the core concept. But of course, they never questioned the nature of the money that those people were using, right?
Right.
At the time, I remember some folks who were like, oh, yeah, maybe we could use Bitcoin for it, right? At the time, the Bitcoin network, the throughput and the cost per transaction was kind of
Right.
prohibitive to ensure that people. So you like, oh, I don't want to use that example because it's so trite. People would be like, oh, well, if you want to like settle up something with someone, and let's say like the equivalent in US dollar terms, and the US dollar has been debased since then, let's say 10 US dollars. What does that cost in Bitcoin in US dollar terms at the time? Oh, it costs 2 US dollars, right? So it's prohibitive. Now,
Yeah.
there's something that's changed here along the way. And I can talk about Bitcoin if you want and Lightning and all that. But
Yeah.
you at Circle and what you folks have done, and you've seen, like the technology.
Right.
The cost per transaction on different networks, Ethereum is one, EVM compatible layer 2s. Like the micropayment case that I used to hear
Right.
12 years ago has now actually happened. And
It has.
there's a follow-on question, but I welcome your thoughts because
Yeah. No, I
you're
think
very
like,
knowledgeable about this.
yeah, no, thank you for the question. I think let's say let's take a simpler example. I think micropayments for a lot of users, a lot of folks, like it happens somewhere in the third world. Let's come to that as well. But like, let's come to like a transaction that you're doing at your coffee shop. That transaction takes away, typically is like, it has a fixed cost of like 25 cents and then like about 3% on top of that. So
Interchange fee.
for interchange, for the payment processing, and all of that. So it has a fixed cost and a variable cost, right? Like fundamental.
Yep.
Similarly, in your microfinance case, like you said, like, hey, look, like if you are doing a transaction in, like, we are sort of helping the unbanked in the rest of the world, um, they have a question, they have this problem around, like, can they custody their funds? How are they custodying their funds so that, like, nobody steals their money, which you brought up in your
Yeah.
Venezuela example?
Yeah.
How can they do peer-to-peer payments? Because that's where most of the economy works. Like, we want to make sure that it's not just like, not everything is being routed through the government. People should be able to use it like cash, like, essentially, which is like, what custody enables. And the cost of settlement has to be really low. On all of these three things, we have come very far. Custody is superbly easy. Circle has a set of products called programmable wallets that make it really easy for any application on the internet to sort of offer self-custody to users, right? So anybody, anywhere in the world with a phone can self-custody their funds. And the critique of self-custody is like, what happens if, like, users lose their keys? We have ways to, like, recover those keys. We have, like, ways that are that
recovery.
are like, we enable, now we have, like, advances in how to recover keys, like, without essentially compromising users.
Account abstraction, right?
Account abstract. We have smart contract wallets. We have account abstraction. We have multi-party computation that allows all of these technologies allow us to manage keys really, really well on your phone, so you can actually custody your money. If you can custody your money, you can now do P2P settlement, because mobile networks have gotten really, really cheap already in, like, most of the world. And the last thing is the cost of settlement, which you said, like, was 20% in your Bitcoin example. Today, like, you can settle, if you and I were to settle a USDC transaction, it would be for less than a cent. Okay.
Yep. It depends which network we use, but if we do it on layer 2, it's fractions of a cent. Yeah, I agree. Like,
we can do it on a layer 2. We can do it on Solana. We can do it on any of the other chains. Like, all of the chains are trending to, like, where the cost is, like, so low, so much so that USDC transactions have surpassed, like, Visa transactions. Like on a 12-month run rate basis, we have, like, USDC transactions have far surpassed how much Visa is. And Visa is consumer to business flow, business to business flow, business to consumer flow. All of them, we're just getting started.
I said this to someone the other day, what you just said, and they couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I said, no, go look at the data. Like,
look at the data. And, like, I mean, it's not apples to apples, like, in the sense that
true.
Visa is, like, people, like, pulling out their card for, like, everyday goods. But
true.
USDC is a much more primitive, like, it's a much more of a, not a primitive form of money. It's a core primitive on which you can build a consumer payment product.
Yep.
And so I feel like we're going to have, like, much more transaction. We're going to probably 10x the transaction volume from where we are today in the next 3 years. And so that doesn't happen if the networks don't scale, if the cost of settlement is not cheap, if people believe that this is insecure. But these are real businesses, real customers, like, using, like, USDC for settlement around the world, and they can use it in any flow. So yes, to your micropayments example, I think between phones, self-custody, and good stable coins, micropayments can be solved, not suggesting that it has been solved. And then, broadly speaking, for payments in generally, yes, settlement risk chains are pretty resilient. They've shown that for 10 years now. Ethereum hasn't gone down, and and the cost has come down significantly. So, yeah.
Let's try and make it, not to say that this hasn't been tangible, but let's make it more tangible.
Yeah.
So, backstory. Tether, which is kind of the biggest, I guess you'd say, competitor to Circle, but it's not the same thing, but it's used in the same way. I have people in my life who I know who use Tether to get money out of the People's Republic of China to places where they live, because they run e-commerce companies, right? Doing this for years. It works. And then they turn Tether USDT into local currency at person on the corner who does that. And then they have local currency, they buy groceries, right? Now, that's me anecdotally from the people that I know. But to bring it back to, like, because people have always asked me, they go, "Oh, who uses it for anything, right?" Well, you've just got to you could get a Ryanair flight if you want, and it'll take you about 3 hours to find places where people use this stuff. In
Yeah.
Circle's case, where are people using Circle, and what are they using it for?
Yep. So what they're using is the two stable coins that we issue. One is USDC and second is Eurocoin, EURC. People are using it, like the core use case is people use it for crypto market settlement. Like, if you're buying and selling Bitcoin around the world, you need a way to sort of represent the dollar. And that's the genesis of like USDC. From there, people have taken it into their wallets and they've essentially used it as a substitute for having a US bank account, right? So if
Yep.
I have wallet and if I have dollars in it, I don't need a dollar bank account in the US, not dollar bank account in the US. Now, who needs a dollar bank account? You'd be surprised how much of the world is interested in holding dollars, right?
I would not be surprised, but maybe some listeners would be.
Some listeners. So it's a very simple idea. If you don't live in the United States, getting a dollar bank account is very, very difficult, right? You have to be somebody who has access to significant business banking, or have to be really, really rich to have like an offshore account somewhere that
Yep.
offers dollar banking. But for the average user who has a phone everywhere in the world, if you're in like Brazil, or if you are in
you could be in Argentina, Turkey,
yeah.
Vietnam.
You
You could be in any number of countries that
there's no
aren't on the
Bank of
OFAC
America
sanction
there.
list.
Yeah, there's no Bank of America there offering those users dollar accounts. Now, why do they want dollars? They want dollars because they want to fight off inflation. It's a savings account. They want
Even
to
though inflation for US dollars has been bad, it's not as bad as local
not as bad.
currency.
It's not as bad as local currency.
Yep.
It's a store of value. It's fundamentally seizure resistant. To your point, like if it's on my phone, it's mine. People can't take the money away from me. And they need it for like if you are doing any kind of business in the world, like if you're buying and selling
Yep.
goods from Vietnam with any like south to south trade, south to north trade, north to south trade, all of those goods and services are priced in either in dollars or in euros. And without good banking rails, it becomes impossible to like actually do the trade. So if we want more trade in the world, we have to make sure that people can exchange that money really, really
Excellent.
easily. And to exchange that money very, very easily, the best solution we have in the market right now is what Circle has, which is like a Circle stablecoin, which allows you to exchange money between any two endpoints in the world for less than a cent in less than 10 seconds. That is a remarkable innovation, right? Like, which like, and
right?
Yeah, it is. It is
And there's no counterparty risk in it. Like they have to trust Circle has got the holdings, but like you're not worrying about chargebacks or anything. Like it's done.
No chargebacks. There's no way to roll the transaction back. It's not gonna disappear once it's there. Yes, you have to trust Circle, but like Circle is very well audited. It's sort of like, it's regulated. It sort of publishes its reserves. Our reserves are managed by BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world. Like it's much easier to trust Circle than it is to trust your local bank. That's my point. And now you're holding dollars anywhere in the world on your phone, which is a remarkable idea. Like there are 5.5 billion phone users in the world. Like let's say 1 billion of them are in China, 4 billion of them outside 4.5 billion outside of China. All of them would like access to dollars.
What's the total addressable market on that, right?
I think like, yeah,
total enormous.
It's massive. I think every phone user,
massive.
Even in China, like people want to hold dollars, but like it's more complicated. But like outside of China, people want to be able to hold dollars. Now governments have an incentive to say like, listen, we want to make sure that this is regulated. We can track it. We can instrument all of that. Like that is not an issue, but the capability to hold money on your phone and being able to hold dollars on your phone, essentially, like it's a remarkable idea. Like it's such a cool idea that like, and it's great for the US because now you're exporting the dollar to every sort of phone user in the world, which was not possible before. And we should want to do that as a country. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, usually I'd say we're coming up on time, which we are, but um, your thought. Let's keep stringing that along a little bit because um, you've obviously seen this over a few decades, and like you see what I see, and it's just endlessly fascinating. Um, there is kind of an interesting market or set of markets, and your point around trade, which go it doesn't it's not Ricardo never really kind of addressed the currency in the middle. He just said like some people can make cotton, other people can make mine iron, like you don't mine iron, but like coal, and then you
Right.
trade. But like you never really talked, to my knowledge at least, about like the intermediary thing that is the money. Let's talk a little bit about that, and then we'll come to the last part of the episode. Now, to make my question more precise, I'm thinking off the top of my head. International trade, people exchanging goods and services, is facilitated by the currency in which they interact with one another. Now,
Right.
barter doesn't really work. It can at like a small level, a local level. But once you get to a globalized economy and we need a way in which to exchange value with one another, if we can't exchange with one another, then the exchange doesn't happen, right? And everyone ends up, well, not everyone, but people end up worse off, Ricardo. Um, talk just, I really welcome your thoughts there around like, if indeed people settle on USDC, Circle's stablecoin, as
Right.
a way in which to transact with one another, what do you think are almost the positive externalities that spill out of that? Which is they've got a way to transact. They wouldn't have done the transaction otherwise. Now they
Right.
can, and they're not being ripped off 15% by
Yeah.
certain companies that do these messagings. Telegram company, not Telegram itself, but it was a former Telegram company.
Right.
Um, what are your thoughts there about like the potential of what this unleashes, if indeed it is allowed to be, and it's already happening, but if it's actually embraced? Like that could be quite a big deal
Yeah.
for people's
I mean,
betterment.
it is happening. I think like I mean, what do we want for the world? We want like more interconnectedness. We want more prosperity. We want more empowerment for the world. And when will that happen? That will happen when everybody can do it for themselves, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the dream. And I think the positive externality of like being able to custody your money much more easily, being able to settle with each other very easily, is that like you have now put these tools of empowerment within reach for everybody, right? Like essentially, like you're not saying that there is a like financial services, credit, being able to take risk, being able to price that risk, being able to sort of like, one of the amazing things about the United States is like it's this incredible infrastructure around risk, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
propels the US economy forward. Like if I wanted to go start
Yep.
a company today, like it's the infrastructure to take risk is there. There's a credit score. There is like, there are businesses that will serve me, who will like let me take on risk. There are complicated financial products that allow me to do new things, essentially create
Yep.
value. And so, at least in my vision, the answer to your question is all of these products get distributed like far out to every country in the world, and like the ability to take risk, the ability to like dream ideas, the ability to sort of like go and like marshal resources for those ideas, the ability to find markets and like transact in those markets, all of that gets accelerated. And um, see, nobody could have predicted the internet of 2024, 2025 in 2000, right?
Sure.
uh, and so but you could have said like in 2000 that like, hey, it'd be really nice if like everybody in the world was on the internet, when the internet had like 100 million people, that's it. And we are at like 5.5 billion people now.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is it'd be really nice if like people like in 25 years were empowered to settle with each other, had like access to cheap banking, had like access to credit products, could like come up with an idea and find financing on the internet for that idea, communities could get together and like sort of pool resources to like fund projects around the world. That I think is the final end state. Like we then are not like beholden to like the few who can like, you know, aggregate capital because they have like specific like connectivity into the in society, right? Like we want that connectivity to be available to everybody. We want everybody to be able to raise capital, everybody to be like, not but maybe everybody can be
Well, those
somewhere.
who are able to actually generate appreciative value based on the
Yeah.
resources that are given to them, and then we propel
Yeah, I
things
think
forward.
that's the dream. I think like then you have like unleashed human spirit. You have sort of like taken this, it's a fundamentally American idea, but you've taken it to sort of like the edge of the internet. Like basically everybody has potential, everybody's valuable. We want to make sure that everybody can like, you know, realize whatever it is that they want to do. And I find that idea like it's a really powerful idea. Like, you know, and like it's an American idea. I have, or put another way, I've only discovered it in America, right? Like this idea that anybody can do it, and America loves to take risks, and so um, I think I think that could be it. Like I think that could be a good end state for this financial internet that we are imagining. Like and yeah, we will manage all kinds. We will have difficulty as we get there, right? Like we will
Yeah, of
not. It
course.
will not be an obvious straight path, um, but yeah, I'm I'm very hopeful. Yeah.
Good. I lived in the US for about 5 years, I think, and I know what you're talking about. It's yeah, it's a whole attitude and whatnot. And, I totally get it. I'm agreeing with
Oh,
you.
that's great. I think the US is a good it's a good country. It's like it makes the best things in the world, the best widgets in the world. The smartest people want to come here. The US
Yeah.
passport is like it's so valuable. Like the the biggest issue in the election is the number of people who want to be here. And like and so like I think, and we are saying like, look, these are like USDC is like one embodiment of like, you know, US values, and like Circle is an embodiment of like US values, and like the internet is like fundamentally anchored in like Western US values of like openness and like being able to say whatever it is that we want, and so we want to preserve that and we want to further it as far as possible.
Hey, I've got a million other anecdotes. Not a million, maybe a dozen.
Right.
Second time I've used that one. Um, Look, we're closing in on time.
Yeah.
To finish these episodes, usually we ask guests what they're interested in, and it's an open question. It doesn't have to be about what we've just talked about.
Yeah.
It can just be whatever you think is interesting. Now, as a preface, and I'm not meant to do this as the host, but I'm going to do this because this is something that caught my eye last week. Something called Truth Terminal, which is two Claude chatbots talking to one another,
Yeah.
right? And they basically like they pull in data from all these parts of the internet, and then they start spurting things out, which is kind of an aggregate of what people are talking about on the internet, which is highly offensive in many cases, but it turns out that's what people are talking about on the internet. So that has caught my attention, listeners. That's for you, but like I can come back to it. But Nikhil, I've already talked too much. What has got your eye, and what do you think is interesting?
Yeah. So in I have followed that, but not as closely. But in a similar vein, I do think like as the internet evolves and like these agents get smarter, um, or want to get smarter, we will need a way to sort of like price the intelligence or price the data that is like making these agents smarter.
Uh-huh.
And what has me obsessed right now is this idea that um, you know, when I go to chat gpt, or like for that matter any sort of like AI agent, AI sort of like client, I'm sort of getting the benefit of a lot of this content that is published on the open internet, right? And the question is like, how are those original content creators being compensated?
Mm-hmm.
And at least in my mind, I foresee a world in which there's an economy around this content, and that economy is, it'll be easiest to price that economy in dollars. And like, because like you're a publisher in Indonesia and you have something interesting, and that like, now how do you, let's say you want to price your content in some interesting way, probably going to price it in dollars or in Indonesian rupiah. We can, but like easier to price it in dollars. And then like we will have a bunch of these like, smart models that are trying to get that data and trying to make payments. And those payments are probably going to be like smaller than 25 cents, 20 cents, 10 cents, sub-cent even.
Less.
And we will need an entirely new payments infrastructure to enable that. And that is, again, important if we want all of this content creation to happen at scale. And we want people to, and we want these agents to be smarter, or these like, GPTs to be smarter. We all benefit from them being smarter, but we also need the humans who are actually interfacing with the world and collecting the data and like the publishers who are making a living on this to be compensated. So I foresee this new economy that is based in dollars, which USDC is well placed to serve for like publishers around the world, data creators around the world, data aggregators around the world. And I think it's going to be fundamental to how sort of we move into this AI future where we have all of this new information that is being submitted to these AIs, and like people who are collecting the information are getting compensated appropriately.
Fascinating. It comes back to what they used to teach me, the AI researchers. GIGO, garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
If the value now is on the information that goes in, so you get good information out,
right,
you solve the GIGO problem. And someone has to be recompensated for
creating that information. There are two things. You have to be compensated for creating that information and submitting it, and then you have to be compensated for evaluating that information. And so now, if you're going to price that in dollars, then you need everybody to have an account in dollars. Well, how is somebody who's not in the US to have an account in dollars for them to get paid in dollars, or we get paid in dollars essentially, and like that requires a crypto-based solution. That requires them to have a wallet on the internet that says like, send me dollars here. And I think USDC is the best dollar for being able to do that, right? So, yeah.
Or you accept Bitcoins, know, and that's the forcing function in a way, right? Like,
I don't think it'll get priced in Bitcoin because Bitcoin is more variable. Maybe in the next 10 years, Bitcoin gets less.
At least it doesn't depreciate in the long term like dollars do, but that can be sent. Anyway, that's super interesting. Thank you so much, Nikhil. We are at time though. I hope to have you back again in the near future because it's just fascinating to hear what you've got to think, and I know what you're working on is really, really useful and interesting. So thank you so much for coming and spending time with me today.
Thank you for having a super fun discussion. Thank you.
There you go, Nikhil Chandhok, Chief Product Officer at Circle. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did, because I enjoyed it obviously too much. US listeners, listentreeprime.com, Apple, Android app stores. That's where you get the app. Find me on the Bird app. I'm on there too much, I know. And the more that you bother me on the Bird app, Twitter, X, the more that I'm on it. So make my life harder at Benjamin Dean on that app. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always nice to have you here, and I look forward to seeing you shortly.